There's a strange kind of quiet at the start of this chapter, the kind that always comes right before everything falls apart. Gray and Ben walk into the Singil veterinary clinic, of all places, and if you didn't know these two, you'd never guess what they're capable of. They're here to check on a cat. A small, half-blind, beaten-up stray that Gray took a strange interest in a while back. The vet, a gentle woman with glasses, explains that the little one's mother never really taught it how to survive, that it lost an eye, that it came in filthy and scared. But it'll be okay now. 2, maybe 3 more days and it'll be back on its feet. And here's the thing that makes Weak Hero different from every other fight webtoon out there. One of them mutters it out loud, half joking, half serious. He can't tell if Gray is just weirdly good at making friends, or if he's just a kid who doesn't understand what he's doing at all. Because this is the same boy who put a grown enforcer in the hospital, and now he's standing in a vet's office worried sick about a kitten with one eye. The vet watches them leave and smiles to herself. They're still just boys, after all. That single line hangs over this entire chapter like a warning, because the world outside that clinic has absolutely no intention of letting them stay boys. They step back out onto the street, and the mood shifts immediately. The city at night, the long empty walk home, and that heavy silence between two friends who both know something is coming. Gray's face is tired, bruised faintly at the edges, carrying the weight of everything that's happened. He doesn't say much. He never does. But you can feel it. He knows the peace won't last. Then the chapter pivots, and we meet someone new. A loud, grinning redhead named Rowan Im. He calls himself a problem solver, the kind of guy who floats around the school offering advice to anyone struggling. He corners one of Gray's classmates, tosses him a can of V7 energy drink like it's a peace offering, and starts bragging about how he can help anyone with any kind of problem, whether it's grades or something worse. He's the type who talks fast, smiles wide, and never quite lets you see what he's actually thinking. He praises Gray without even knowing him, marveling at how the top students' notes are absolutely perfect, how the great Gray Yun makes everything look easy. On the surface he's harmless, comic relief, the funny new face. But Weak Hero has taught us by now that nobody is ever just what they appear to be. Because while Rowan is playing the friendly clown, the real machine is already grinding into motion. Out in the district, the Yeongdeungpo Union has begun something they're calling a snake hunt. Word has spread through their ranks. Somewhere in Eunjang there's a fighter they've nicknamed the White Mamba, a kid who humiliated their people, who fights like a cornered animal and doesn't play by any of the rules the older gangs respect. And the Union wants him. Badly. They've split into search teams, spreading out across the neighborhood, moving through the streets in tight groups, hunting for a name and a face they don't even have yet. You see them everywhere in this chapter. Clusters of Union boys in dark uniforms, murmuring, blocking gates, watching students file past with cold, hungry eyes. They're looking for anyone who looks weak enough to break, anyone who might know something. Their logic is simple and ugly. Beat enough people, ask enough questions, and eventually the White Mamba's name will fall out of someone's mouth. Or better yet, he'll show himself trying to protect the ones getting hurt. That's the whole trap. They don't need to find him. They just need to make him come to them. And then the chapter gives us the enforcers, and the temperature drops again. First there's the mention of a fighter tied to Hyeongshin, someone with a reputation for cruelty. And then we get him. Gerard Jean. A blonde kid with a mouthful of braces and a grin that never reaches his eyes. The moment he opens his mouth, you understand exactly what kind of person he is. He's cocky, twitchy, delighting in violence, the sort who enjoys the hunt more than the win. He mocks, he provokes, he circles his targets like a shark that already smells blood in the water. He brags about the schools he's been thrown out of, about the reputation trailing behind his name. This is a boy who was built for exactly this kind of night. The confrontation escalates fast. There's a purple-haired fighter in the mix too, another dangerous piece on the board, and suddenly the calm street becomes a battlefield. Someone gets struck out of nowhere, a hard clean hit that comes from the shadows. Thwack. Thunk. Bodies moving in the dark, the sharp crack of impact, a fighter spinning to the ground before he even understands what happened. The violence in Weak Hero always lands like this, sudden and brutal, no dramatic build-up, just the terrifying speed of it. 1 second there's talking. The next, someone's on the concrete asking why they got hit out of nowhere. And that's the genius of where this chapter leaves us. Because everything is now in place. The vet clinic showed us the boy Gray still is underneath all the blood, the kid who worries about a one-eyed cat. Rowan Im has slid into the picture with his too-wide smile and his hidden agenda. The Union has declared open season, flooding the district with search teams. Gerard Jean and the enforcers are already swinging in the dark, testing the waters, breaking anyone who gets in their way. The snake hunt has officially begun, and the snake they're looking for has no idea yet just how many of them are coming. What makes this arc so gripping isn't the fighting, though the fighting is incredible. It's the pressure. It's watching a net slowly tighten around a group of kids who just wanted to be left alone. Gray built something at Eunjang, a strange little family of misfits who finally found each other. Ben, the loyal friend. The classmates who stood by him. Even the one-eyed cat he refuses to abandon. And now the entire weight of the district's most powerful union is bearing down on all of it, hunting for the one boy at the center of it, using everyone he cares about as bait. You can already feel where this is going. They'll go after his friends first. They'll hurt the ones who can't fight back, the glasses-wearing classmate, the ordinary kids, knowing that Gray can't stand by and watch. Because that's the one weakness the white Mamba has that no amount of skill can protect. He cares. He always cares. It's the thing that makes him human, and it's the exact thing his enemies are about to turn into a weapon. Chapter 51 is a slow, deliberate loading of the gun. It reminds you who these boys really are, and then it fills the streets with people who want to destroy them for it. By the time the last panel fades, the hunt is live, the enforcers are moving, and the quiet from that vet clinic feels a million miles away. The white Mamba of Eunjang is about to become the most wanted name in the district, and the people coming for him won't stop at just him. They're coming for everything he built. And if you know Gray Yun at all, you know he's not going to let a single one of them touch it without a war. Take a step back and look at how carefully this chapter is built, because it's a masterclass in tension. Every scene is a piece being placed on a board. The vet clinic isn't filler, it's the emotional anchor, the reminder of what Gray is fighting to protect. Rowan Im isn't just a joke, he's a wild card whose true allegiance we still can't read. The Union search teams aren't background noise, they're a countdown clock. And Gerard Jean isn't just another thug, he's a signal that the people coming this time fight for the thrill of hurting others. Notice too how Gray barely speaks in this chapter. He doesn't need to. His silence carries more menace than any threat the enforcers could make, because we've seen what happens when that silence finally breaks. The whole district is buzzing with the legend of the white Mamba, trading rumors about a fighter who's supposedly vicious, dishonorable, dangerous, and the tragic irony is that the boy behind the legend spent his afternoon worrying about a wounded cat. That gap between the myth and the human being is the beating heart of this entire series, and Chapter 51 squeezes it for everything it's worth before the storm finally lands. Chapter 52 opens right in the middle of the chaos, and it doesn't slow down for a second. The fight from the end of the last chapter spills forward, fists and bodies in the dark, that sharp brutal rhythm of impact that Weak Hero does better than anyone. Someone's already been hit out of nowhere, spun to the pavement, demanding to know why. And standing over the mess with that loud grin is Rowan Im, the self-proclaimed problem solver, suddenly looking a lot less like comic relief and a lot more like a boy who's in way over his head. Because the people he's tangling with tonight aren't schoolyard bullies. They're union. But the real danger in this chapter isn't the fists. It's the mind behind them. We meet Alex Go, and he changes the whole texture of the arc. Where Gerard Jean is all twitchy aggression and cruelty for its own sake, Alex is something colder and far more frightening. He's a strategist. He leans back with a cigarette and a lazy, knowing smile, and he lays out a plan so cynical it's almost impressive. He says he's going to create the White Mamba. Not find him. Create him. He'll manufacture a story, plant a name, spread a rumor, and let the panic do the rest. If they can't drag the real fighter out of hiding, they'll invent a version of him and watch the whole school tear itself apart trying to make sense of it. It's psychological warfare dressed up as a street brawl, and Alex is clearly enjoying every second of it. His method is disgusting in its simplicity. Grab ordinary Eunjang students, the weak ones, the ones who can't fight back, and beat the information out of them. One by one. It doesn't matter if they actually know anything. The point is the fear. The point is to make the whole district so terrified that someone, anyone, finally gives up the White Mamba's name just to make the pain stop. And so the Union fans out and starts hunting soft targets, cornering kids in alleys and stairwells, roughing them up, demanding a name they mostly don't have. And this is where chapter 52 turns into something genuinely hard to watch, in the best possible way. Because they grab the wrong kid. Or maybe exactly the right one. The bespectacled classmate, the quiet four eyes who has spent this entire series as the ordinary one, the boy with no fists and no reputation, the one who just wanted normal grades and a normal life. They drag him into it. They surround him. And they start hitting him. What follows is one of the most quietly heartbreaking sequences in this stretch of the story. This kid, this completely ordinary kid, understands something the Union doesn't. He understands that if he talks, if he gives up Gray's name, everything falls apart. So he decides to take it. He pulls out his phone and, with shaking hands, fires an SOS into the group chat. A desperate message. Help. They're coming. But the message just sits there, unread, glowing in the dark while nobody answers. And the beating continues. Whack. Slam. The panels don't flinch. They show him going down, getting dragged back up, his glasses knocked askew, blood at the corner of his mouth. And through it all he keeps thinking the same thing, this terrified, almost darkly funny thought. The only one here with any real experience getting beaten up is him. He's used to this. He's the weak one, the one who always took the hits. So if anyone's going to survive this, if anyone's going to buy time, it might as well be him. Just let me buy some time, he thinks. That's all he can offer. Not strength. Not skill. Just his own body absorbing the blows so his friend gets a few more minutes. It's such a devastating inversion of what these violent webtoons usually celebrate. The hero of this chapter isn't the strongest fighter. It's the weakest one, choosing to get hurt on purpose, staying silent while they smack him around, because loyalty is the only weapon he's got. The Union boys sneer while they do it. They talk about the White Mamba like a legend, this dirty fighter who supposedly uses weapons, who supposedly fights without honor. They mock the idea of him. Even as they beat a defenseless kid trying to protect him. Does he really use weapons? Is that right? Smack. Smack. They don't even realize they're describing the person they're about to meet. Because the whole time, that unread SOS is doing its work. And weak hero has trained us to know exactly what silence like that means. It means he's coming. Somewhere out in the district, Gray is already moving, and every wasted second the Union spends on that glasses-wearing kid is a second closer to the storm arriving at their door. The chapter builds this dread beautifully. Alex goes smug confidence, so sure his little scheme will work. Gerard Jin's cruelty, so sure the weak will always break. The endless smacks landing on a boy who refuses to give in. And underneath all of it, the sense that these fools have completely miscalculated. They think they're hunting a rumor. They think they're squeezing a name out of a nobody. They have no idea that the nobody they're beating is exactly the kind of person Gray Yun would burn the whole district down to protect. And then, at the very end, the chapter delivers the moment we've been waiting for. The declaration. After all the mocking, all the speculation, all the talk about who and where and what the white mamba really is, a figure steps forward. Blonde, calm, eyes like ice. And he answers the question the Union has been screaming all night. The white mamba of Eunjang. That fighter you're all so afraid of, the one you've been beating my friend to find. It's me. Is me. 2 words, and the entire balance of the chapter flips on its head. It's a perfect weak hero ending, because it recontextualizes everything that just happened. All that cruelty, all that arrogance, all that wasted violence against a helpless kid, and it turns out the monster they were looking for was on his way the entire time, drawn out not by their clever scheme but by the one thing they'll never understand. They didn't lure him out with strategy. They lured him out by hurting someone he loves. Alex Go thought he was creating the white mamba. He was really just summoning him. What makes this chapter land so hard is the contrast at its core. On one side you have the Union, powerful, organized, cynical, treating human beings like pieces to be broken and discarded. And on the other you have a group of Eunjang kids whose only real strength is that they refuse to abandon each other. The glasses boy takes a beating rather than betray his friend. The friend answers the call the moment it comes. It's loyalty against numbers, love against fear, and even though the Union has every advantage on paper, you finish this chapter absolutely certain they've just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Chapter 52 is the moment the trap snaps shut, except the ones caught in it aren't the ones who set it. The hunters spent the whole night beating a defenseless kid to draw out a legend, and now the legend is standing right in front of them, and he is not happy. The white mamba has arrived. The name they were so desperate to find just introduced itself. And everything that comes next, every fight, every broken bone, every moment of payback, starts from this single icy declaration in the dark. It's me. And nothing about their little snake hunt is going to go the way they planned. And take a moment to appreciate what this chapter is really about underneath all the violence, because it's not about who can throw the hardest punch. It's about the different kinds of strength. Alex Go believes in the strength of manipulation, of turning fear into a weapon and people into pawns. Gerard Jean believes in the strength of cruelty, of breaking whoever's weakest just because he can. But the glasses-wearing boy, bleeding on the ground with his SOS glowing unread in the dark, embodies a strength none of them can even comprehend. The strength to endure. The strength to stay silent while it hurts. The strength to protect someone else at your own expense. He has no power, no reputation, no skill, and yet in that moment he is braver than every Union fighter surrounding him combined. That's the quiet thesis of weak hero, hidden right there in the middle of a beatdown. Real strength isn't about never getting hit. It's about what you refuse to give up, no matter how many times you go down. And when Gray finally steps out of the shadows to answer for that loyalty, it doesn't feel like a fighter arriving. It feels like justice. Chapter 53 explodes out of the gate and never lets you breathe. The declaration from the last chapter has lit the fuse, and now the whole street is a war zone. Fists fly, bodies slam into concrete, and the Union enforcers come swinging with everything they've got. Whack. Whomp. Stomp. The art in this stretch is relentless, every panel a fresh impact, the kind of choreography that makes you feel each hit in your own bones. But what makes this chapter special isn't just the violence. It's the chess game hidden underneath it. Right away we're reminded that the Union didn't send amateurs. These are hardened fighters, cocky and experienced, the kind who block your first punch and grin while they do it. One of them taunts an Eunjang boy for being cool-headed, then immediately eats a counter he never saw coming. The enemy names start piling up, the Jin brothers among them, big brutal enforcers who fight like wrecking balls. There's talk of someone matching Ben Park in raw strength, of a crew 6 deep, of numbers stacked so high that no single fighter should be able to handle them. On paper, Eunjang is completely outgunned. So they do the only smart thing. They scatter. One of the boys screams for everyone to run, and the chase is on. This is where chapter 53 turns into something almost cinematic. The Eunjang kids split up and bolt through the district, the Union hunters pounding after them, footsteps hammering the pavement in that frantic staccato rhythm. And Gray, cool as ever even mid-sprint, makes a calculated bet. He trusts himself in an uphill run. He knows his own body, knows exactly how fast he is, and he's certain none of these thugs can catch him on the climb. They can't catch me, he thinks, and he's right. He's not just running. He's controlling the shape of the fight, splitting the pack, buying his friends room to breathe. But not everyone gets away clean. One of the blonde boys gets cornered, and here the chapter introduces its coldest predator yet in full force. Alex Go. He snatches the kid by the collar, calm and cruel, and starts playing his sick little game. He tells the boy he's free to run. Go ahead. Run away. But just know, when I catch you, I'm going to beat you half to death anyway. It's psychological torture dressed up as mercy, offering an escape he has no intention of honoring, savoring the terror in the kid's eyes. You coward, he laughs, run away. It's genuinely chilling, because Alex isn't angry. He's entertained. To him this whole night is a game, and the people in it are just toys. And then the chapter shifts into its most fascinating gear, pulling back the curtain on the mind of a real tactician. We move to a fighter watching all of this unfold with silver hair and razor focus, breaking down the entire situation like a grandmaster reading a board. Mind games, he thinks, are all about timing. He talks himself through the logic of it. He broke the pattern. If someone had the nerve to step up and stand beside him, they could rattle the opponents to a certain degree. But there's no one here with the guts to do it. So when this fragile silence finally snaps, he'll have to be ready. Ready for bloodshed. It's a stunning little monologue, because it reframes the chaos as something almost surgical. Underneath all the screaming and running, the smartest fighters are counting beats, waiting for the exact half-second when the whole thing tips. For a split second, the chapter tells us, time itself comes to a complete halt. And in that frozen moment, everything hangs in the balance. Then Weak Hero delivers one of its cleverest reveals, and it recontextualizes the entire snake hunt. We finally understand where the terrifying legend of the White Mamba actually came from. Because a huge chunk of it isn't true. It was manufactured. And the architect of that myth is the loud, grinning redhead we met earlier. Rowan Im. It turns out he's been doing something incredibly dangerous and incredibly smart. He's been hopping between facts and lies, inflating Gray's reputation into something monstrous. The wild stories tearing through the district, that the White Mamba put a hole in a man's jaw, that he nearly killed the fearsome Charles Kwok, that he stabbed someone's hand with a pen, that he cracked a skull open with a rock, they're Rowan's work. A chaotic party of half-truths and pure invention, spread deliberately to make the whole district tremble at a name. This is the genius of it. Rowan understood something the Union never will. When you're outnumbered, fear is a weapon. If he can make every enemy hesitate, make them picture some blood-soaked monster instead of a quiet high schooler, then he's evened the odds without throwing a single punch. Everyone trembles at the mere mention of the white mamba, and half of what they're trembling at never even happened. It's the exaggerating trickster's masterpiece, a legend built out of rumor and nerve. And the boys hearing these stories are caught in exactly the trap Rowan set. They're raging and rioting one moment, then paralyzed by doubt the next, conflicted by the rumors, their aggression only amplifying the confusion. They came here sure they were hunting one dirty fighter, and now they don't even know what they're up against. Is he a person or a myth? Every wild claim makes them angrier and more afraid at the same time, and that fear makes them sloppy, makes them hesitate at exactly the moments when hesitation gets you hurt. The chapter caps it all with a proper introduction, the trickster stepping fully into the light. He's not just some background schemer. He's part of the crew now, one of Eunjang's own. And he gives himself a title with that same theatrical flair he brings to everything. Eunjang's hyper elbow, Rowan Im. It's such a perfect character beat. He's chaos incarnate, a fast-talking manipulator who fights with lies as much as fists, and he's just planted himself right at the heart of Gray's little family. What makes chapter 53 so satisfying is how it layers its storytelling. On the surface it's pure adrenaline, a chase and a brawl through the night streets. But underneath, it's about intelligence as a weapon. Gray using his body and the terrain to control the fight. The silver-haired tactician reading the rhythm of violence like sheet music. Alex Go weaponizing fear through cruelty. And Rowan Im weaponizing fear through storytelling, building a legend so terrifying that the enemy defeats itself. For different kinds of minds, all circling the same night, all understanding that these fights are won in the space between the punches. And that's what elevates weak hero above the average brawler webtoon. Yes, the fights are gorgeous and brutal. But the series never forgets that real conflict is psychological. The Union brought overwhelming numbers and raw aggression. Eunjang answered with speed, tactics, nerve, and a myth so potent that grown fighters freeze up at the sound of it. The snake hunt was supposed to corner a single boy. Instead it's dragging the hunters into a maze of fear and misdirection they don't have the tools to navigate. By the time chapter 53 fades out, the board has been completely reset. The Union thinks it's still the hunter, but the ground has shifted under its feet. Gray is loose in the streets, uncatchable and calm. The tacticians are waiting for their moment. And Rowan Im's legend is doing more damage than any fist could, turning the enemy's own imagination against them. The White Mamba isn't just a fighter anymore. He's a ghost story the whole district is telling itself in the dark, and the people who came to kill him are starting to realize they might be the ones being hunted. It's worth pausing on just how bold Rowan Im's strategy really is, because it reveals the deeper genius of this whole arc. Most fighters in a story like this measure strength in fists and numbers. Rowan measures it in perception. He understood that a reputation, if it's frightening enough, does the work of 10 bodyguards. So he took Gray's real victories, the ones that genuinely happened, and he wrapped them in a thick coat of invention until nobody could tell where the truth ended and the myth began. A hole punched in a jaw. A near-fatal beating of a feared enforcer. A skull cracked open. Some of it real, most of it exaggerated, all of it terrifying. And the beauty is that it doesn't matter which parts are true, because fear doesn't fact-check. By the time a Union boy is standing in a dark alley wondering whether the quiet kid in front of him is the monster who cracked a skull with a rock, he's already half-beaten. Rowan turned a schoolyard brawler into a boogeyman, and in doing so he handed Eunjang the one thing they were missing against overwhelming numbers, which is the enemy's own hesitation, their own imagination working against them in the dark. Chapter 54 opens with a quiet, satisfying confirmation. It's working. Rowan Im's insane gamble, the whole legend he manufactured out of rumor and nerve, is actually paying off. The Union boys are hesitating, second-guessing, tripping over their own fear. And Rowan, grinning through the tension, decides to lean all the way into it. He plants himself in front of the enemy and delivers a warning dripping with false confidence. "Sure," he says, "you've got numbers. But even if every terrifying story about the white mamba is true, the very first one of you who steps forward is the one who dies." It's a total bluff, and it's magnificent, because he says it like a man who's already counted the bodies. What makes Rowan so compelling here is that he understands his own crew's weakness and turns it into strength. Yes, Eunjang is outnumbered. He admits it flat out. It's true they're at a disadvantage. But still, he insists, it's different here. And then he says the word that's really holding the line. Allies. He's not alone. Behind him stand the boys who've chosen to fight together, the glasses-wearing friend, the rest of the misfit crew, all of them planting their feet next to a red-headed trickster who's writing checks with his mouth and daring the enemy to cash them. On the other side, the doubt spreads exactly the way Rowan wants it to. The Union fighters mutter among themselves, one of them, a doubter they call Grape, always finding reasons to worry. They tell Rowan he's doing great, that they just need to buy a little more time. They can't quite decide whether the white mamba is a genuine threat or a ghost story, and that indecision is poison in a street fight. Every second they spend arguing is a second Rowan steals for his side. But bluffs only hold for so long, and eventually one of the enemies calls it. He's had enough of the Mamba or elbow or whatever nonsense and comes at Rowan swinging, screaming that he'll kill him. Rowan meets him head-on. Crack. A brutal, sudden clash, Rowan giving as good as he gets in that scrappy, unpredictable style of his. But this enemy is tough. He shakes it off, and the fear flips into fury. "Now I'm actually mad," he snarls. "You're dead for real next time." The trickster's luck is running thin, and the fists are getting heavier. Then the chapter widens out to reveal the bigger, more dangerous confrontation, and this is where it really grabs you. Because someone has come specifically for Ben Park. A big, powerful fighter, muscular and mean, steps up with a nasty grin and a reputation of his own. He knows exactly who Ben is. "You're super famous, right?" he says. "You're the one who beat up Jimmy Bay." And then he explains himself with chilling casualness. Crushing little shits like Ben, he says, is a hobby of his. This isn't personal. It's sport. The enemy waves his crew forward and the numbers close in. Slam. Slam. They come at Ben from every angle, trying to bury him under sheer volume. But Ben Park is not the kind of fighter you can smother, and he answers with cold defiance. "Try and take me down yourself," he tells the big man, refusing to be intimidated even as the odds stack against him. It's classic Ben, all quiet steel, letting his fists do the arguing. What elevates this fight, though, is the intelligence the enemy brings to it. Because this brute isn't just strong, he's observant. As they trade blows, he's reading Ben like a book, narrating the analysis in his head. Ben is strong, sure, but his movements are big. He has a tendency to raise his upper body when he commits. And that, the enemy realizes, means his weak point is his midsection. It's the same kind of tactical breakdown we've seen the heroes use, except now it's being turned against one of them, and it's genuinely unsettling to watch. He acts on it. Pow! A hard, precise strike straight into Ben's exposed midsection, exactly the opening he spotted. Got him good, the enemy thinks, satisfaction spreading across his face. For the first time in a while, Ben Park has been cleanly hit by someone who actually knew where to aim. The big man is thrilled. He's found the crack in the armor, and he intends to exploit it. And that's the trap chapter 54 sets so beautifully. Everywhere you look, Eunjang is under pressure. Rowan's bluff is starting to crumble against an enemy too angry to stay scared. Ben has been isolated, surrounded, and struck in his one weak spot by a fighter smart enough to keep hitting it. The Union's numbers are finally starting to tell. The legend of the White Mamba bought time, but time is running out, and the real, physical, exhausting reality of being outnumbered is closing in hard. But if you've read enough Weak Hero, you can feel the second half of this fight coiling underneath the first. Because getting hit once is not the same as losing. The enemy is celebrating a single clean shot, calling himself a phony's worst nightmare, promising Ben that it's time to get hooped. He's so pleased with his own cleverness that he doesn't stop to consider the most dangerous thing about a fighter like Ben Park. Ben learns. Ben adapts. And a man who just showed you his entire strategy out loud has handed you the map to beat him. The chapter ends on that knife's edge, the enemy cocky and grinning, sure he's got Ben figured out, sure the next blow ends it. It's time for you to get hooped by this phony, he crows. And every reader knows that's the exact moment right before a weak hero fight turns completely around. Ben has been struck, yes. But he's also been given something priceless. He knows how this man thinks now. He knows the analysis, the target, the pattern. And the thing about brutes who telegraph their genius is that they never expect the quiet one to be smarter. Chapter 54 is all about the weight of numbers and the desperation of holding a line you can't hold forever. Rowan's mouth kept the enemy frozen for a while, but bluffs run dry. Ben's strength kept him standing, but even strength has a weak spot, and this enemy found it. The whole chapter tightens like a noose, everything closing in on the Eunjang crew at once. And yet, underneath all that pressure, there's a promise. These boys don't break easy. They get hit, they get red, they get surrounded, and then, right when the enemy is sure it's over, they turn it around. The stage is set for exactly that. Ben has taken his hit. Now it's his turn to answer. And that's the beautiful cruelty of how this chapter is structured. It refuses to let you feel safe. Every small victory is immediately undercut by a new threat closing in from another direction. Rowan wins a moment of fear, then loses it to an enemy too furious to stay afraid. Ben stands tall against the numbers, then eats a clean shot from the one brute smart enough to read him. The chapter keeps yanking the ground out from under you, and that's exactly what makes it work. You finish it genuinely worried, genuinely unsure how these kids climb out of the hole they're in, and that uncertainty is the whole point. Chapter 55 is the payoff, and it hits like a hammer, which is fitting, because a hammer is exactly what this fight is about. We left Ben Park struck clean in the midsection, the big enemy grinning, certain the little famous kid was finished. But then comes the moment that flips everything. Ben doesn't even budge. The enemy's best shot, the one he was so proud of, lands, and Ben just stands there, eyes hard, absorbing it like it was nothing. He don't even budge, the enemy realizes, and you can feel the confidence drain out of him in an instant. This, he understands with a cold jolt, is the real deal. The enemy has one more trick, and it's a nasty one. He winds up a technique he thinks of as his sledgehammer, a crushing, heavy blow meant to end fights outright. And here's where Ben Park's mind becomes his deadliest weapon. Because as that fist comes in, Ben recognizes it. He's felt something like this before. It's almost like, he thinks, matching the sensation to a memory, reading the technique in real time. He's never taken a punch quite like that, and yet his body knows how to answer, because Ben doesn't just fight with muscle, he fights with pattern recognition, with a fighter's library of everything that's ever hurt him. He works out the counter on the spot. If you pull the sledgehammer's balance away from behind, the whole thing collapses. So that's what he does. Whoosh. Whomp. Ben slips inside, disrupts the enemy's base, and delivers a devastating return blow straight to the face. Crack. Cat crack. The big man's head snaps, his own momentum turned against him, and the fight tips over the edge in a single exchange. Grah, the enemy howls, staggering, everything he was sure of falling apart around him. Thud. Wham. Ben Park doesn't stop. He takes them down, one after another, the phony who was supposed to whoop him now crumpling under a fighter who read him perfectly and hit back harder. It's such a satisfying sequence because it embodies the entire philosophy of weak hero. Strength alone loses to strength plus intelligence. The enemy had power and even a bit of cleverness, enough to spot Ben's midsection. But Ben had something deeper, the ability to feel a technique, understand it, and dismantle it while it was still in the air. Dead on, right now, he thinks as he lands the real one. And just like that, the man who called himself the phony is on the ground, and Ben Park is still standing. But chapter 55 doesn't let you celebrate for long, because the real horror of this arc is unfolding somewhere else entirely. The scene cuts, and the tension curdles into dread. There's a phone, a desperate flurry of messages. Someone is being held captive, and they manage to get a warning out. Being held up by Yeongdeungpo. With Gray. Here's the location. It's an SOS thrown into the dark, a lifeline flung out by a friend who's out of options. And then we see who's behind it, and it's the coldest villain in the whole arc, Alex Go. He's beaten someone bloody, a boy laughing through a mouthful of blood, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a scream. Even broken, even bleeding, this kid just laughs. Ha 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 ha. Alex, unbothered, lays out the true shape of the trap. Fine, he says. You beat me. I get it. But you know this isn't the real hunting ground, right? And then he drops the devastating detail. Alex Go, Gerard Jean, and the White Mamba, all in 3 completely different locations. The Union didn't set one trap. They set 3, spread across the district, time to tear the rescuers apart. This is Alex Go's masterstroke of cruelty. He forces an impossible choice. Now, make your choice, he sneers. It's easy, isn't it? 3 names. 3 places. Gerard Jean. Alex Go. Gray Yun. You can only reach one in time. So who do you save? It's the sadistic heart of the whole scheme, not just to beat these boys but to make them choose which of their friends gets left to the wolves. The captured boy stares at that impossible decision, blood in his mouth, the clock screaming down. The chapter pours on the urgency. A location surfaces. The Daebang underground passage, marked out on a map among the neighborhood's tunnels. Footsteps hammer through the dark, tat-tat-tat, as someone sprints toward one of the 3 battlegrounds. Phones ring out unanswered. None of them are picking up. Damn it. Every failed call is another second lost, another friend somewhere out there in danger. The whole chapter becomes a race against a countdown none of them can see the end of. And then Ben Park, fresh off his own victory, makes the call that pulls the plan together. He reads the situation fast and starts issuing orders. You go to Alex, he tells his ally. He's at Singil. I'll head to where Gray is. They split up to cover the impossible spread, each one taking a battlefield, refusing to accept Alex Go's cruel math. The Union wanted them scattered and paralyzed by the choice. Instead, the Eunjang crew answers by dividing themselves across all 3 fronts, trusting each other to hold the line until they can regroup. Now, Ben urges, hurry. There's no more time to waste. What makes chapter 55 so gripping is the way it braids triumph and terror together. On one thread, Ben Park delivers one of the most satisfying counters in the series, proving again that a thinking fighter beats a strong one. On the other thread, Alex Go reveals a trap so cold and calculated that winning a single fight barely matters, because the real battlefield is the choice itself, the fear, the impossible race across a district full of enemies. The Union isn't just trying to beat Eunjang. It's trying to make them tear themselves apart, deciding who to abandon. By the final panel, everyone is moving. Ben is sprinting toward Gray. An ally is racing toward Singil and Alex Go. Somewhere, Gray is walking into the third trap, probably already aware, probably already calm. The threads are all pulling taut at once, 3 fights lit and burning across the neighborhood, and the whole crew hurtling toward a collision they can't avoid. Chapter 55 ends with that scream still ringing in the air. Now, hurry. And you turn the page knowing that everything, every friendship, every plan, every drop of blood spilled tonight, is about to come crashing together all at once. And that final image lingers with you, all of them running through the dark toward separate nightmares, bound together by nothing but trust and the refusal to leave anyone behind. It's the purest expression of what makes this crew special. Chapter 56 belongs to Rowan Im, and it transforms him from a fast-talking trickster into one of the most quietly heroic figures in the entire arc. We open with everyone scattered across the district, racing toward their separate battles. Ben sprints toward Gray, screaming for the others to hurry, his face tight with fear for a friend he might not reach in time. And back where Rowan stands, the loud redhead who built the white Mamba legend out of thin air is about to prove that he can do more than just talk. The bluffing is over. Now come the fists. The enemy that charges him is a monster of momentum, a raging bull of a fighter who just barrels forward, boom, 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 trying to flatten anything in his path. And here we see the real Rowan for the first time. He fights with elbows, sharp and unconventional, slipping strikes in at angles nobody expects. He's not the strongest boy in this fight, not even close, but he's clever and he's slippery, and for a while he dances around the raging bull, landing his surprise elbows and staying just out of reach. But this is where chapter 56 gets its emotional weight, because Rowan isn't fighting for himself. He's fighting to protect the weakest member of the crew, the glasses-wearing friend who has already taken so much punishment tonight. And that responsibility changes everything about how Rowan has to move. He can't just dodge and run. He has to hold ground, has to plant himself between the enemy and the kid who can't defend himself, and that decision costs him. His clever patterns start to fail. He realizes, with growing dread, that his rhythm has been blown, that he can't land a clean hit on these moving targets anymore. The very unpredictability that kept him alive is running out. The narration takes us right inside his tactical mind, and it's genuinely gripping. Rowan is doing math in the middle of a beating. He thinks about his situation with 3 opponents, calculating whether he could pull off one more surprise attack, whether after the initial exchange he might isolate one of them into a one-on-one, whether landing just one more real threat could tip his odds. He's constantly working the problem, refusing to accept that he's outnumbered and outmatched, searching for the angle that turns a losing fight into a survivable one. It's the same intelligence he used to build a legend, now turned to the desperate arithmetic of staying on his feet. And through all of it, he takes the hits. Wham! Crack! Whump! The enemy's close in and Rowan absorbs blow after blow, his body battered, his face bloodied, and still he keeps positioning himself between the danger and his friend. There's a heartbreaking moment where the glasses kid, terrified, watches Rowan getting torn apart and tries to intervene, and Rowan won't let him. This is his fight to take. He mocks the enemies even as they beat him, that trickster's grin never fully leaving his face, taunting them, telling them their arrogant little show ends right here. You little bitch, they snarl, and they hit him again. What makes this chapter so affecting is the contrast between Rowan's mouth and Rowan's heart. All arc long he's been the schemer, the liar, the guy who wins with rumors instead of fists. It would be easy to read him as a coward who lets a manufactured reputation do his fighting. But chapter 56 shatters that idea completely. When it actually counts, when there's a defenseless friend behind him and a wall of enemies in front, Rowan implants his feet and bleeds. He turns his own body into the shield. The trickster, it turns out, has more courage than half the fighters twice his size. The enemies can't understand it. They keep expecting him to break, to run, to give up the way weak fighters do. Instead he keeps getting up, keeps cracking jokes through split lips, keeps buying time with his own pain. They ask what the hell is wrong with this freak. They call his resistance pathetic, sneer that he's just flailing around desperately like a cheap little nobody. And Rowan, half-conscious, keeps calculating. Keeps protecting, keeps refusing to fold. It's one of those weak hero sequences that hurts to read precisely because you've come to love this loud, ridiculous character, and now you're watching him sacrifice himself for someone else. There's a beautiful thread running underneath the violence, too, about what these bonds actually mean. The glasses friend keeps calling out to Rowan, keeps trying to help, and you can feel how much it wrecks him to watch someone take a beating on his behalf. This is the heart of Eunjang. Not the strongest crew, not the most feared, but a group of boys who will physically put themselves in harm's way for each other without hesitation. Rowan didn't have to make this his fight. He chose to. That choice is the whole soul of the chapter. And then, just as Rowan's strength is finally running out, the chapter delivers its turn. Something shifts. A presence enters the scene, and the tone changes from desperate to something almost reverent and terrified at once. The friends look up. There's a question in the air, worried voices asking if everyone's alright, calling out for Gray, calling out for Eugene. And then a single word cuts through everything, spoken like a promise and a threat at the same time. Friend. Someone has arrived, someone who changes the entire equation, and the last image lands with the weight of a name. Gerard. Gerard Jean. The calm, cold, silver-eyed enforcer whose reputation precedes him like a shadow. After a whole chapter of Rowan holding the line by sheer will, the real monster of the night finally steps onto the stage. And the dread that fills those final panels tells you everything. Rowan bought time with his blood, protected his friend with his body, and now the person he bought that time to face down is here, and he is on a completely different level from anything they've fought so far. Chapter 56 is a masterclass in making you love a character right before the story puts him in mortal danger. It takes Rowan M., the comic relief liar, and reveals the fierce, loyal, tactically brilliant heart underneath the act. It shows you that the legend of the White Mamba wasn't just clever marketing, it was one boy's way of protecting people he'd decided to fight for, and when the marketing ran out, he stepped up and paid the price himself. By the time Gerard's name lands on that final panel, you're gripping the edge of your seat, because the trickster who gave everything to hold this ground is now standing in front of the one enemy his tricks can't fool. The genius of weak hero is right here in this chapter. It never lets a fight be just a fight. Every punch Rowan takes means something, because we understand exactly who he's protecting and exactly what it's costing him. His courage isn't loud and flashy. It's stubborn and bleeding and desperate, the courage of a boy who refuses to move no matter how many times they knock him down. And the arrival of Gerard Jean doesn't feel like a cheap cliffhanger. It feels earned, terrifying, the natural escalation of a night that keeps demanding more from these kids than they should ever have to give. Rowan held the door as long as he could. Now the real storm has walked through it, and everyone in that alley knows the hardest part of the fight is only just beginning. It's worth lingering on what Rowan's stand really represents in the larger story, because it reframes his entire character. When we first met him, he was a punchline, a loud redhead handing out energy drinks and bragging about being a problem solver, the kind of guy you assume will fold the second real danger shows up. The genius of this chapter is how completely it inverts that assumption. Rowan doesn't fold. He becomes the immovable object. And the reason is the thing that runs through all of Weak Hero like a current, the simple, stubborn refusal to let a friend get hurt on your watch. He isn't fighting because he thinks he can win. He's fighting because there's someone behind him who can't fight at all, and that responsibility is heavier and more motivating than any hope of victory. Watch how the chapter frames his exhaustion. Every panel he's a little more broken, a little slower, his elbows landing softer, and yet he keeps planting himself in the same spot, keeps taking the hits meant for someone weaker. That's not the courage of a strong fighter who knows he'll prevail. It's the far rarer courage of a weak one who's decided it doesn't matter whether he prevails, as long as he holds. And that distinction is the whole reason his sacrifice hits so hard. The Union sees a nobody flailing. We see a boy giving everything he has for people he's chosen as family. By the time Gerard Jin's shadow falls across the scene, Rowan has already won the only victory that matters to him. He kept his friend safe. Whatever comes next, that can't be taken away. Chapter 57 splits the night wide open, cutting between two brutal battlefields and cranking the tension to a breaking point on both. It opens on the arrival that ended the last chapter, and the fear it inspires tells you everything. Gerard Jin has come. The crew stares at him, and the recognition ripples through them like cold water. That's Gerard Jin, they realize, and he's even more chilling in person than in the stories. Rowan, battered and swaying, understands immediately that things have just climbed to a whole new level. This isn't another thug to outmaneuver. This is one of the most feared fighters in the district, and he's looking at a group of exhausted, bleeding boys like they're already finished. Gerard doesn't posture much. He simply promises them they'll get to know him, and then he delivers on it. Thwomp. Crash. His power is on a different scale entirely, the kind of strength that ends fights in single exchanges. The crew feels their legs going heavy, the exhaustion of the whole night catching up all at once. But this is Eunjang, and even cornered, even spent, they think. They start planning. If they can catch Gerard before he settles into his rhythm, if they don't give him a single second to recover, maybe, just maybe, they have a chance. Fuck him up first, one of them says, and they throw themselves at the mountain because standing still means dying anyway. Then the chapter cuts to the second battlefield, and this is where it becomes truly harrowing. Somewhere else in the district, the confrontation with Alex Go has turned savage. The cold, smiling strategist is still playing his cruel games, still taunting, still treating the whole thing like entertainment. He mocks the boy who came for him, sneering that luring them in was easy, that all their rescue attempt accomplished was turning one beating into two. Alex Go doesn't fight with rage. He fights with contempt, and that somehow makes him scarier than any screaming brute. And the violence here is genuinely hard to watch, because it stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like an execution. A blonde ally, one of Gray's friends, is taking a beating that crosses a line. Wham! 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 Blow after blow rains down, far past what winning requires, and the horror of it registers even on the faces of onlookers. Is he actually trying to kill him, someone asks, and the question hangs there because the answer might be yes. Somebody screams at the attacker to stop, calls him a crazy bastard, but the hits keep coming. This is the true face of the Union stripped of all its swagger. Not a rivalry. Not a turf war. Just cruelty for its own sake, the strong destroying the weak because they can. The chapter forces you to sit in that helplessness, that awful feeling of watching someone you care about get hurt while you can't do anything about it. The blonde friend, half broken, keeps refusing to give in, and every panel makes you more desperate for someone, anyone, to arrive. Weak hero is merciless with this kind of tension. It makes you feel every second the cavalry doesn't come. And then the cavalry comes. The energy of the whole chapter flips in an instant when a familiar figure steps out of the dark, and the enemy's faces drain of color. Ben Park. The name lands like a thunderclap. "You," one of them stammers, "Ben Park, you fucking bastard." He arrived. Fresh from his own victory, having sprinted across the district, Ben walks into Alex Go's slaughter and changes the temperature of the entire scene with his presence alone. There's a moment of pure, electric dread on the enemy side, because they know exactly what Ben Park is capable of, and they know the beating they were enjoying is about to be repaid with interest. But Chapter 57 has one more twist, and it's a great one. Because as the confrontation crystallizes, someone grabs one of the boys and demands answers with terrifying intensity. A hand closes around a throat. Squeeze. And a cold voice asks the question that reframes everything. "Are you the one who did that to Alex?" It turns out the beating dealt out tonight didn't go unanswered. Alex Go himself has been hurt, badly, and now something even more dangerous has come looking for whoever's responsible. "I'm asking you a question," the newcomer insists, tightening his grip, and you feel the ground shift again. The hunters keep summoning bigger hunters. Every escalation drags a new predator into the light. That's the brilliance of how this arc is structured. It's not one fight, it's a chain reaction. Rowan Stan summoned Gerard Jean. The rescue of one friend dragged the crew into Alex Go's trap. Ben's arrival at Alex's battlefield answers one horror and immediately raises another, because now someone is demanding to know who dared to hurt Alex Go, and that someone radiates a menace all his own. The night keeps deepening, keeps pulling in stronger and colder fighters, and the Eunjang boys keep getting more exhausted with every escalation. What makes Chapter 57 so effective is the way it balances its two fronts. On one side, Gerard Jean, a wall of terrifying strength that the crew has to gang up on and pray. On the other, Alex Go, a sadist whose cruelty finally gets interrupted by Ben Park's arrival, only for an even bigger threat to emerge in the aftermath. Neither battle is won by the end. Both are left screaming toward their climaxes, and you're caught between them, desperate to know how any of these kids survive a night that just refuses to stop getting worse. And underneath the violence, the same beating heart keeps pulsing. Every one of these fights exists because these boys refuse to abandon each other. Ben ran across the whole district not for glory but because his friends were in danger. The crew throws itself at Gerard Jean not because they can win but because backing down means leaving someone behind. Even the blonde friend absorbing that horrifying beating won't break, because breaking means betraying the others. Its loyalty stretched to its absolute limit, tested against enemies who understand only power and cruelty. By the final panel, both battlefields are balanced on a razor's edge. Gerard Jean looms over an exhausted crew that's out of tricks and running on fumes. And at Alex Go's blood-soaked corner, Ben Park has arrived only to find a new and hungrier enemy demanding to know who hurt his ally. The question echoes into the dark. Who did that to Alex? And you turn the page knowing that whoever answers it is about to face something far worse than anything this endless night has thrown at them yet. Chapter 57 is the arc tightening every screw at once, refusing to give anyone a moment to breathe, and setting up collisions that feel genuinely dangerous for everyone we've come to love. Step back and appreciate how ruthlessly this chapter uses its structure to torture you, in the best possible way. By cutting between Gerard Jean's front and Alex Go's slaughter, it never lets you settle into either fight. Just as you start to hope the crew might handle Gerard, it yanks you to a scene where a friend is being beaten within an inch of his life. Just as that horror peaks, it delivers Ben Park's arrival like a gulp of air, only to snatch it away again with a new predator materializing out of the dark. This is deliberate, and it's masterful, because it mirrors exactly what the characters are feeling, that sense of the night spinning out of control, of every problem solved birthing two more. Notice too how the chapter deepens Alex Go as a villain. He isn't driven by turf or pride or even hatred. He's driven by amusement. The cruelty is the point for him, the beating extended long past any tactical purpose simply because he enjoys it. That makes him uniquely frightening, because you can't reason with someone who's having fun. And it makes Ben Park's arrival land with real moral weight, because Ben represents the exact opposite, force used only to protect, never to savor. When the two philosophies finally collide, it won't just be a fight between strong boys. It'll be a collision between two completely different answers to the question of what strength is for. And then, right at the edge, the chapter drops that final gut punch of a question, someone demanding to know who dared to hurt Alex, and you realize the pyramid of enemies goes higher still. The crew keeps climbing a mountain that keeps growing taller. That relentless escalation, that refusal to let anyone rest, is exactly what makes this one of the most nerve-shredding stretches in the whole series, and it leaves you desperate to know how any of these exhausted, bleeding boys find the strength for whatever comes next. And it's worth sitting with just how exhausted these boys are by this point, because it's central to why the chapter works. This isn't the start of a fresh fight where everyone's at full strength. It's the deep end of a marathon night, and you can feel it in every panel, the heavy legs, the ragged breathing, the way even standing upright costs them something now. Against Gerard Jean, that exhaustion could be fatal, which is exactly why the crew's decision to rush him before he settles is so desperate and so brave. They're not fighting from a position of strength. They're spending the last of their reserves on a gamble, because the alternative is to lie down and let the night win. That refusal, that willingness to keep swinging when every muscle is screaming to stop, is the quiet heroism threaded through the whole chapter, and it's what makes you believe these kids might just pull off the impossible. Chapter 58 is where the tide finally, violently turns, and it does it through the sheer overwhelming force of Ben Park. We pick up on the battlefield where the strength-obsessed enemy has been beating down Gray's friends, and the arrival of Ben changes the whole atmosphere. With Ben Park here, one of them realizes with dawning horror, it changes everything. Up to now the Union has had the numbers and the momentum. But Ben is a different kind of animal, and the enemies who were so cocky a moment ago suddenly understand that the ground has shifted under their feet. The enemy who's been dominating, a brute named Forrest Lee, decides to meet Ben the only way he knows how, with raw power. His whole plan is to bury Ben under a barrage, to press him down with pure strength until even the famous Ben Park crumbles. It's a reasonable bet against almost anyone. But it's exactly the wrong choice to make against Ben, and the chapter savors every second of that mistake. Because Ben Park says the words that seal Forrest Lee's fate. I'm not one to lose in strength. What follows isn't really a fight. It's a demolition. Wham! Smack! Crack! Ben meets the brute head-on and simply overpowers him, matching every ounce of strength and then adding more. The enemy feels it happening in real time, that sick realization creeping across his face. It burns, doesn't it, Ben taunts, you starting to feel what's going on. The bully who built his whole identity on being the strongest guy in the room has just met someone stronger, and the confidence drains out of him blow by blow. He picked the one contest he was guaranteed to lose. And then comes the moment that defines the whole sequence. Ben lifts him. Just picks the big man clean off the ground, and the enemy's mind breaks a little at the impossibility of it. I've been lifted, he thinks, sheer disbelief in the words. Let the game begin, then, Ben says, and proceeds to slam him into the earth again and again. Slam. Slam. The narration frames it perfectly. It wasn't a fight. It was an assault. Forrest Lee can't even attempt to fight back, and the rest of the Hyeongshan mob freezes in place, watching in horror as their strongest is thrown around like he weighs nothing. The chapter reaches for a gorgeous image to capture what it feels like from the inside. To Forrest Lee, it's like an avalanche of giant blunt boulders crashing down, boom after boom after boom, an unstoppable natural disaster wearing the shape of a boy. It was a fear he'd never felt before. This is a fighter who terrified others for a living, and now he understands exactly what his victims felt, drowning under a force he simply cannot resist. Weak hero loves this kind of poetic justice, the predator suddenly cast as the prey, forced to feel the helplessness he inflicted on everyone else. But here's the thing that makes Ben Park more than just a monster, and it's the emotional core of the chapter. He stops. When it's clearly over, when Forrest Lee is broken and the point is made, a voice reaches Ben. His friend, battered but alive, tells him the game's over. So stop, Ben. And Ben stops. He doesn't need to keep going. He isn't cruel like Alex Go, doesn't beat a fallen man half to death for sport. He answered violence with overwhelming violence to protect his friends, and the moment they're safe, the rage switches off. That restraint is what separates Eunjang from the Union. They fight to protect, not to destroy. The reunion that follows is quietly moving. The friends check on each other, wincing at bruised and bloodied faces, the adrenaline draining into exhausted relief. "Gosh, your face," one of them says, and there's a whole world of care packed into that small, awkward moment. These boys just survived something terrible, and the first thing they do is worry about each other. It's the warmth at the center of all the brutality, the reason the fights matter in the first place. But the night isn't over, and the chapter cuts back to the other battlefield to remind us of that. Rowan Im is still out there, still fighting, and now he's facing a new and dangerous kind of enemy, one who uses weapons and fights with sadistic flair. This villain is all cocky theatrics, mocking Rowan, taunting him about wiping his friend's blood off a handkerchief, treating the whole confrontation like a game he's already won. Even as Gerard Jin's stamina finally starts to flag, this new threat steps in fresh and armed, and Rowan, already exhausted, has to keep standing. It's a smart structural choice, because it keeps the tension alive even in the middle of triumph. Yes, Ben just delivered one of the most satisfying beatdowns in the arc. But the story immediately reminds us that victory on one front doesn't mean the war is over. Somewhere else, a bloodied Rowan is squaring off against a weapon-wielding creep who thinks he's untouchable, and the outcome is anything but certain. Weak hero never lets you rest too long. Every high is chased by a fresh danger. What makes chapter 58 land so hard is the way it pays off everything the arc has been building. All night the Union pushed Eunjang around with numbers and cruelty and overwhelming force. And now, one by one, the tables are turning. Ben Park arrives and single-handedly dismantles the enemy's strongest, not with tricks but with a strength that dwarfs the bully who thought strength was his whole identity. The fear the Union spread all night gets handed right back to them, and their fighters learn what it feels like to be helpless. By the final panel, the balance of the whole night has tilted. Ben has crushed Forrest Lee and shown mercy the enemy never would. The crew is bruised but alive and back together. And though the danger isn't finished, though Rowan still stands bloodied against a smirking armed opponent, there's a new feeling in the air that wasn't there before. Hope. The White Mamba's friends aren't just surviving anymore. They're winning. And the Union boys who came into this night so sure of their power are starting to understand, one shattered fighter at a time, that they picked the wrong crew to hunt. There's a deeper theme running through Ben Park's demolition of Forrest Lee that's worth drawing out, because it's central to what Weak Hero is really about. All night, the Union has operated on a single ugly premise, that power gives you the right to do whatever you want to people weaker than you. Forrest Lee embodies that premise perfectly. He crushes little shits for fun. He measures his whole worth in how easily he can overpower others. And the poetic brilliance of this chapter is that the story doesn't defeat him with cleverness or a lucky break or a hidden trick. It defeats him with the exact thing he worships. Ben Park is simply stronger. The bully who lived by strength dies by strength, and in the moment he's lifted helplessly off the ground, he finally experiences the world from the perspective of every victim he ever crushed. That's not just satisfying action. It's a moral argument delivered in fists. Strength without restraint is just cruelty waiting for someone bigger to come along. And when someone bigger does come along, someone who uses that same overwhelming power but chooses to stop the instant his friends are safe, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Ben and Forrest Lee have nearly identical gifts. What separates them is what they do with those gifts, and that difference is everything. It's also why the chapter is careful to show Ben stopping the moment he's told to. A lesser story would let him keep swinging, would indulge the revenge. Weak hero knows better. The mercy is the point. Ben proves he's stronger, and then proves he's better, and those two proofs together are what make him a hero instead of just another monster in a night full of them. The Union came to teach Eunjang a lesson about power. They ended up learning one instead. And notice how the chapter uses Ben's victory to shift the entire emotional weather of the arc. For chapters now, dread has been the dominant note, the sense of a net closing, of enemies multiplying faster than the crew can handle them. Ben lifting Forrest Lee off the ground is the first moment that dread cracks and something else leaks through. Momentum. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, the impossible night is survivable after all. It's a small shift, undercut immediately by Rowan's new danger, but it's real, and it changes how you read everything that comes next. Chapter 59 is a showcase of two very different kinds of fighters, and it's an absolute blast from start to finish. On one side you have Rowan running on fumes and pure audacity. On the other you have Gray, calm and surgical, dismantling a cocky opponent with almost bored precision. Between the two of them, the chapter turns the whole night's momentum firmly in Eunjang's favor, and it does it with style. We open with Rowan, bloodied and exhausted but absolutely refusing to fold. The narration calls it what it is. Unstoppable bravado. No matter what happens, Rowan keeps his head up, keeps grinning, keeps talking that endless trash. His body is failing him, but his spirit simply will not quit, and there's something genuinely inspiring about watching this scrappy trickster stay on his feet through sheer force of will. He's decided to go along with Gray's plan, to hold his corner no matter the cost, and he throws himself back into the fight with a swagger that has no business existing given how battered he is. And Rowan fights the way Rowan always fights, which is to say, cleverly and completely without honor. In the middle of the brawl, he spots his opening. He grabs a can of V7, that same energy drink he's been carrying like a running gag all arc, cracks it open, and splashes it straight into his enemy's eyes. "Arg, my eyes," the guy screams, blinded and flailing, and Rowan pounces. Whack! It's such a perfect Rowan moment, winning not with strength he doesn't have but with improvisation, turning a soda can into a weapon, doing whatever it takes to survive. He's not a powerhouse. He's a survivor, and survivors use everything. There's a real warmth to how the chapter frames him, too. His friends watch this ridiculous, brave, bleeding boy keep getting up and keep swinging, and you can feel their respect for him growing. Rowan built the White Mamba legend with lies, but there's nothing fake about the courage he shows here. He said he'd hold the line and finish them off, and he means it, spitting jokes through bloody teeth even as the fight grinds on. It's the kind of heroism that doesn't look heroic, all mess and desperation and stubbornness, and it's impossible not to root for him. Then the chapter shifts to Gray, and the whole energy changes from scrappy chaos to cold mastery. Gray is facing a loud, kick-happy fighter, a guy who fancies himself some kind of martial artist, calling out his strikes like he's in a tournament. Left kick. Right kick. Middle kick. "I can do this all day," the guy laughs, showing off, sure he's got the upper hand. And Gray just reads him. Every telegraphed kick, Gray slips, the narration landing that devastating little judgment. Too slow. Swoosh. The show-off throws everything he has and none of it lands, because Gray is operating on a level this poser can't even perceive. And then Gray ends it. After letting the guy tire himself out, after reading the entire pattern, Gray picks his moment. "Alright, here," he says, almost gently, and delivers a single clean, brutal counter. Pow! The kicker who could do it all day is suddenly on the ground, undone by a fighter who barely broke a sweat. There you go, Gray thinks, and moves on. It's the quiet, terrifying competence that makes Gray such a compelling protagonist. He doesn't gloat, doesn't waste motion. He simply solves the problem in front of him and looks for the next one. The chapter brings in Grape, the nervous doubter from the enemy side, and even he can't slow the tide. The Eunjang fighters are hitting their stride now, each of them handling their corner, the fear that gripped them all night curdling into something like control. Gray gets genuinely annoyed at one loudmouth messing with him, and that flash of irritation is scarier than any war cry, because when Gray decides someone's crossed a line, that person's night is over. Whack! He smashes through them with the efficiency of someone who's simply done playing. What's beautiful about Chapter 59 is the contrast at its heart. Rowan wins ugly, splashing soda in eyes and clawing through on grit and improvisation. Gray wins clean, reading opponents like open books and ending fights with a single precise blow. Two completely different philosophies of fighting, two completely different personalities, and yet they're united by the same thing, the refusal to lose, the determination to protect their crew. The trickster and the prodigy, holding their separate corners of the same war, both turning the tide in their own way. The Union boys, who started this night so sure of their overwhelming advantage, are starting to crack. Their strongest got demolished by Ben. Their tricks are being answered with better tricks. Their show-offs are being humiliated by a quiet kid who's just better than them. And the chapter drives it home with the enemies themselves starting to talk about backing off, warning that if the Eunjang crew doesn't want to shed any more blood they should leave, only to have that same energy thrown right back in their faces. Stop whining and get the hell out of here. The hunters have become the hunted, and they know it. By the end of Chapter 59, the whole shape of the battle has changed. What began as a desperate defense against impossible odds has become a genuine counterattack. Rowan is still standing on pure bravado, refusing to go down. Gray is carving through opponents with cold ease. Ben already broke the enemy's strongest. Piece by piece, corner by corner, Eunjang is winning a war they were never supposed to survive. And the best part is how they're doing it, not by becoming as cruel as the Union, but by being cleverer, tougher, and more loyal to each other than their enemies could ever understand. The night that was meant to destroy them is turning into the night they prove exactly who they are. What's so rewarding about watching Gray work in this chapter is how completely it inverts the usual power fantasy. The kicker opponent is loud, flashy, full of movement and noise, calling out his techniques like he's performing for a crowd. He looks, on the surface, like the more exciting fighter. And Gray dismantles him precisely by being everything the show-off isn't, still, economical, patient, wasting nothing. There's a lesson buried in that contrast, one the whole series keeps returning to. Real skill doesn't need to announce itself. The most dangerous person in the room is usually the quietest one, the one watching, reading, waiting for the single moment that ends things. Gray lets his opponent exhaust himself on strikes that never land, and in doing so he turns the enemy's own showboating into the weapon that defeats him. Every wasted kick is energy Gray doesn't have to spend. Every taunt is a tell Gray files away. And when the opening finally comes, he doesn't hesitate or gloat, he just takes it, one clean blow, done. Set that against Rowan on the other front, winning through pure scrappy improvisation, splashing soda in eyes and clawing forward on nothing but nerve, and you get the full picture of what makes Eunjang special. They don't all fight the same way. The prodigy and the trickster couldn't be more different. But they share the one thing that actually matters in this series, the absolute refusal to abandon the people beside them. That shared heart is why, corner by corner, they're winning a night they had no business surviving, and why the Union's overwhelming numbers are quietly, steadily coming apart in their hands. It's also worth appreciating how much personality the chapter packs into its fight choreography, because Weak Hero never lets a brawl be generic. Rowan's Sodacan trick isn't just a cool move, it's a complete character statement, telling you everything about how he sees the world. He doesn't believe in fair fights, because fair fights are a luxury for people strong enough to afford them. He's spent his whole life as the underdog, and underdogs win by being willing to do the thing nobody expects. The V7 can he's been carrying around as a joke becomes the perfect weapon precisely because nobody takes it seriously, just like nobody took Rowan seriously until it was too late. And that mirrors Gray on the other front in a fascinating way. Gray's whole style is also about subverting expectations, letting a stronger-looking opponent tire himself out, hiding devastating precision behind a calm, unassuming exterior. Both of them win by being underestimated. Both of them turn their opponent's arrogance into the weapon that beats them. The Union fighters keep making the same mistake over and over, looking at these unremarkable kids and seeing easy prey, and paying for that assumption every single time. By the end of the chapter, that lesson is being carved into the enemy one bruise at a time, and the fear that Eunjang spread all night is curdling into something the Union recognizes with growing horror. They picked the wrong crew, and now there's no easy way out of the hole they dug. Chapter 60 is the exhale after the storm, and it's one of the warmest, most satisfying chapters in this whole stretch of Weak Hero. After a brutal night of fear and blood and impossible odds, the arc finally lets its characters breathe, and it uses that space to remind you exactly why you fell in love with these boys in the first place. It opens with a phone call, Gray checking in, asking how it went. And the answer comes back with that easy Eunjang swagger. Kicked their asses, of course. We smashed the shit out of them. The snake hunt is over. Against everything, against the numbers and the enforcers and Alex goes cruel three-way trap, Eunjang survived, and more than survived. They won. The crew gathers near Noryeongjin Market, and what follows is pure, well-earned heart. These battered, bandaged boys come together in the aftermath, and the chapter frames them beautifully as a bunch of hot-blooded youths all gathered in one place, alive, bruised, and grinning. There's a lovely running beat around the quiet, glasses-wearing member of the crew, the one who took a beating earlier to protect Gray's name. It turns out he has a passive skill honed over years of being the errand kid, an almost supernatural ability to guess exactly what drink each person wants and grab it from the nearest convenience store. He shows up with a bag full of everyone's favorites, and the crew lights up. Damn, you're the best, they cheer, and it's such a small, human, perfect moment. After all that violence, the reward is a cold drink handed to you by a friend who knew what you wanted. There's real tenderness in how the chapter handles Rowan, too. The loud trickster who bled to protect the crew looks around at these boys sharing their war stories, and he's genuinely, quietly surprised. All his life he's been an outsider, a schemer, someone who never quite belonged anywhere. And now here he is, part of something, surrounded by people who fought beside him and would do it again. He realizes that maybe some of these kids lived lives as rough as his own, and that they've grown into something he didn't expect to find, a family. It's a gorgeous bit of character work, letting the Chaos Gremlin have a moment of belonging he clearly never thought he'd get. The crew marvels at Ben Park, still stunned by just how monstrously strong he is, trading stories about the fights, laughing about the fear now that it's safely behind them. They're excited to share their tales of bravado, and the chapter lets them, giving each of these boys a moment to be a kid again instead of a soldier. It's the calm that makes all the fighting mean something. Weak Hero understands that action without heart is just noise, and chapter 60 is wall-to-wall heart. But this is weak hero, and it never lets you forget that a bigger machine is always turning in the background. The chapter shifts to the analytical member of the crew, and here it opens up the larger picture in a way that recontextualizes everything. He starts thinking about what this battle actually means. About stigma, about how being marked as a target sticks in a person's mind, about how dangerous it is when a whole group decides to stigmatize someone. He's worried, and he's right to be, because he understands that they didn't just win a fight tonight. They kicked a hornet's nest. He works through the politics of it like a detective. The guys from Yeoksan High, he reasons, were a one-time thing, an exception. But the Hyeongshan mob throwing itself at Eunjang, that's different. It's almost as if someone declared a full-scale war against the Union itself. And crucially, the top of the Union, the feared Donald Na, didn't show up in person. Maybe, he theorizes, Eunjang isn't even worth Donald Na's personal attention. Or maybe, more ominously, this whole thing was about dragging Hyeongshan High into something bigger. The pieces don't quite fit yet, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes it scary. Then the chapter pulls back the curtain on the man himself, and Donald Na is a genuinely chilling presence. Pale, red-eyed. Calm, he's not a street brawler at all. He's a businessman. We see him being introduced into this world through a Mr. Kong, and immediately he's talking like a corporate raider, concerned with expanding the union system, laying claim to transportation purchase rights, noting that the student council is already under his control. Just hear me out, he says with a serpent's smoothness, and you won't be disappointed. This is a different kind of villain entirely, one who doesn't need to throw a punch because he owns the ground everyone else is standing on. The Union isn't just a gang. Under Donald Na, it's becoming an empire. The chapter makes his power concrete with a ranking, the shuttle patch list for the Yeongdeungpo area, and there at the very top sits Donald Na himself, with Jake G, head of another crew, just beneath him. It's a stark reminder of the mountain these Eunjang kids have unknowingly started to climb. They think they won a fight. In truth, they've just entered a game played by people far above their weight class, people who see the whole district as a board to be controlled. And then comes the beat that turns the whole warm afterglow cold. One more name gets added to a wanted list. Number 15. Eunjang's White Mamba, real name unknown, the fighter who knows about the battle at Noryeongjin between Hyeongshan and the others. Gray, quiet, kitten-loving Gray, is now officially a wanted name, logged into the district's underground rankings. The narration lands the warning with beautiful understatement. And this turns out to be a huge storm. The legend Rowan built to protect Gray has now made him a target for the entire underworld. The very fame that saved them tonight is about to become the thing that hunts them tomorrow. The chapter closes by planting the seed of the next threat, and it's a great one. A new figure enters, cold and commanding, calling someone over. Come here. A purple-haired boy with glasses and dead, tired eyes. And a name lands like a stone dropped in still water. Wolf Kyun. We don't know exactly what he is yet, only that the way the panels linger on him promises danger. Someone who doesn't like being called by his name, a fighter with an edge we haven't seen before. Weak hero closes one arc and immediately opens the door to the next, and that new door has a wolf standing in it. But the very last note the chapter chooses to hit isn't menace. It's tenderness, and that's what makes it perfect. A few days later, we return to the little vet clinic from where this arc began. Gray, back to check on the one-eyed cat, the stray he refused to abandon through all of it. Thank you, they say to the vet. We'll be off. Yeah, see you again. The cat is okay. The boy who fought a war is worried about a kitten. And that circle, from the vet clinic at the start of the arc to the vet clinic at the end, tells you everything about who Gray Yun really is underneath the terrifying legend. A wanted fighter on an underworld list. And a kid who just wanted to make sure a wounded animal survived. That's the magic of Chapter 60. It gives you the victory lap you desperately wanted after such a grueling arc, all the warmth and camaraderie and cold drinks with friends joy these boys earned with their blood. And then, without ever breaking that warmth, it quietly lays out the terrifying shape of what's coming. Donald Na and his empire. The wanted list with Gray's alias on it. Wolf Cume stepping out of the shadows. The storm the narration promises. The genius is in the balance. The peace feels real precisely because we know it can't last, and the danger feels heavy precisely because we've just been reminded how much these characters have to lose. Chapter 60 ends this arc the way the best chapters of Weak Hero always do, by making you care so much about these kids that the threats on the horizon feel genuinely frightening. They survived the snake hunt. They grew closer for it. Rowan found a family, the crew found their strength, and Gray went right back to caring for a broken little cat as if none of it happened. But the district is bigger than they know, the enemies are richer and colder than any they've faced, and somewhere out there a wolf has just heard the white mamba's name. The night is over. The real war is only beginning. And you close the chapter already desperate to know what happens when that storm finally breaks. The more you sit with Chapter 60, the more you appreciate how deliberately it plants the seeds of everything to come. That wanted list isn't just a throwaway detail, it's a promise, a guarantee that the peace of this celebration is borrowed time. Donald Na isn't just a new villain, he's a whole new tier of threat, the kind of enemy you can't simply outpunch because his real power is money, influence, and control over the systems everyone else depends on. And Wolf Cume standing in that final doorway is the story quietly announcing that the difficulty is about to climb again. What makes it all land is the contrast with the warmth of the reunion. If the chapter had only shown the dangers ahead, it would feel bleak. If it had only shown the celebration, it would feel hollow. By weaving the two together, letting these boys laugh and drink and belong even as the storm gathers over their heads, it makes you feel the full weight of what's at stake. You want to protect this. You want these kids to keep their little family, their cold drinks, their stupid jokes, their rescued cat. And that's exactly why the threats feel so heavy, because now you have something to lose right alongside them.